can't guarantee you a $5,000 month like the business coach down the road can. But in 10 years, you will go, I'm so glad I did that. That's made me tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. But it's just not direct.
I thought I fucking knew it all. I sometimes, you get memories of some of the shit you posted 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't believe that shit's been going that long. And I was preaching some stuff and I'm telling everyone how to live their life. And I read it back now, I'm like, it is so cringeworthy. Like, I was 30 years old. Do you know how many fuck-ups and twists and turns and life changes have happened since then?
4 years in Hong Kong, I look back and go, man, I've just slowly but surely become a different person.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful for that.
I think there's a lot to be said for, being an in-person coach first and then moving more towards online.
People don't play the long game now, and I don't know if it's social media, I don't know if it's competition with other people that are making $5,000, but everyone's in this quick, what can I do? Jon, this is I'm really excited for this episode because I've quite openly said ever since I've met you, you're probably the toughest bastard that I've ever known. Like, when I first met you, you were preparing for a strongman competition in UP, going to a seminar. And I remember hearing that you tore your bicep off the bone before that competition actually happened and still went through with it. Tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah, I mean, well, close. I actually tore it off the bone in the competition, but it popped and I partially tore it training. So this thing came about. There's a gym in Hong Kong called Ursi's, a guy called Gary Manwaring who runs that. You might have heard of that gym. Obviously, you've lived over there. So I got to know those guys pretty well. And obviously, having working at UP, I kind of got going to that gym for the strongman stuff. Really enjoyed the training. And then all of a sudden, we found out the Arnold was coming for the one and only ever time. Arnold Classic was going to be in Hong Kong. And you're like, fuck, that's a pretty good opportunity to compete. So they have like the strongman, amateur kind of strongman. It's in weight classes. So I had to make weight for it and things like that. And you pick your weight, and then obviously you've got all the events to do. So I was training, and a couple of weeks out, it initially popped doing a tire flip. So I went to pick up the tire, and because the tires, I've got tight and fucked up biceps anyway, mostly from jiu-jitsu. So as I go to pick it up with the straight arms, like you see on some of the videos, deadlifting where it pops a bit, I went to lift it and it popped. Didn't fully go. So I iced it. It kind of felt okay for a week or so, and then I carried on with the training. And then I think a week out before the comp, it kind of went again in a slightly different place. So more the top of my forearm when I'm doing the stone. So because again, a lot of with strongman, you're kind of picking up awkward objects. You've not always got a solid grip. You've not always got the perfect position of a deadlift to pick up a stone, right? Your hands are very
Stuart McGill would shudder, right?
Yeah. So it pops again as I'm lifting the stone and trying to pick it up onto what I'm doing. And I'm like, fuck. And then people are like, you're going to still compete. And I'm kind of like, well, if it's going to go, it may as well go in the competition, right? Why not just fucking do it? Like I've been making weight. I'm ready to fucking go. I want to do it anyway. And so I'm like, fuck it. I strap everything up, tape it up. I put everything on it you could fucking think of before I start the competition. I do the first event, which I think was, it was the yoke walk into Farmer's Carry. So I get through that and I feel it a bit, but nothing on that was really a problem. And then the second event was the log. So I fire up the log on the first rep, and it's reps for time basically. And then I fire it up on the second one, and it pops, and everything collapses on the left side. And I'm like, fuck, that didn't feel good. And then I squat down to do the press, and my left side just won't go anywhere. So I put it down, and I'm like, right, okay, I'm out of that event. I think it's gone, but I've got everything taped up. And I knew if I take everything off and take all the strapping off, that I was done for the competition. And you'll know, anytime you have like a serious injury or anything that's quite painful, adrenaline kicks in. And it's a few minutes later, it's not really as painful as you think. So I'm kind of like, well, it feels okay. And I go in the back, and the next event's deadlift. So I start warming up on the deadlift, and because I've got everything strapped up, I'm like, this kind of feels okay. And I work up to, I don't know, maybe 70, 80% of whatever the weight is that I'm about to do. I can't quite remember what the weight was. And I'm like, feels okay, fuck it. I'll do the next event. Anyway, I start on the deadlift. The ironic thing was I was kind of my adrenaline was so fucking pumped. And I'm probably in a little bit of shock or whatever the fuck's going on with me that I fire the first rep of the deadlift up. And this is a weight I've been working on in the gym that felt really fucking heavy. It went up so easy. I was like, fuck, I'm going to smash like 10 reps with this. But as I'm doing the second, third rep, my arm is pulling and pulling and pulling like it's like the bottom part of my arm is going to pull away from the top part of my arm. And my conscious all of a sudden just went, if I keep going, I'm going to do some serious fucking damage because I didn't know whether it had fully gone at this point. So anyway, I stop at about 6, 7 reps. I'm like, I'm fucking done. And then I'm out of the comp. So I'm like, okay, I can't continue. I'm going to fuck up my arm. And even then, I'm in denial. I get home later in the day and it's bruised a bit and it's short as fuck. But I'm looking at the other one and I've got quite short biceps anyway. So I'm stood in the mirror and I'm like, is it really fully popped? And Danny, my missus, she's looking at it and going, it looks fucked. And I'm like, you think? Is it that bad? I'm still in denial. So, knowing Hong Kong, I'm like, fuck it. I just get up the next morning, go to A&E, sit there for a few hours. And they do the scan. And then the lady's there. She says, yeah, can you see this big gap here? Like, this is one half of your ligament and this is the other half. It's completely torn off. So I was like, okay. So I said, I'm assuming I need surgery to reattach that then. So yeah, that was the story. So I was one of them. I just thought, fuck it. If it's going to go, it's going to go. And it's going to go at some point anyway. Do I want it to go in the gym where I've got no story, or goes in the competition and I've at least got a bit of a story about it? So yeah, that's what happened.
But maybe in this example, maybe rightly so, but like in general, people obviously are so much trying to get away from pain that so many people would have not have entered. They would have taken the step back. What do you think that was in you, whether it's something upbringing or experience? What is it that you think made you go, fuck it, if it's going to go, it's going to go?
I don't know. For me, I'm stubborn, right? Once I've entered something, for me, I need to find a way to see it through. So unless it's impossible for me to try, I'm going to try. And I'm the same with any event, any competition I've ever done, entered or tried. Like, even when I was fighting and things, I was fucking scared to death. Like, people don't talk about that part when they're in it, but I had serious issues with nerves, anxiety and stuff before. And it was horrendous. And there was times I was like, fuck, I don't know if I want to go through this. But I was just stubborn that, look, I've committed to something. Everyone knows I'm fucking doing this. So I'm going to do it. And, we'll see how it goes. And usually my experiences, I've got through it in some way. So I don't know. I don't know where that came from other than just an old school kind of stubbornness that I've still kind of got, even now with injuries and things. I'm like, I try and find a way to fucking still train in a way that makes me feel good, which is usually hard for me. So yeah, I would just say stubbornness. I don't know really where that came from, but I do try to see things through. Success or fail, I'll try to see it through and then move on to the next thing.
Do you think that's an element of what's helped you with some of the anxiety and the mental health struggles? Because I know you've spoken about mental health a lot, and obviously this month being Male Mental Health Month, this is probably the good time for that question, right? Like, what do you think has helped you get over these things, and what do you think that men in particular for this month can do to help make a difference, whether it's with themselves or with someone they know?
I mean, it's a tough one, right? Because everybody's anxiety and stress is different. And I think what we as a society sometimes do is, we judge when someone says what kind of things make them stressed out and what kind of things cause anxiety. And, when I was competing and things, it was a very different type of stress and nerves. And it in that world, for me, although I talk to other people about it, I talk to sports psychologists about it, and everyone has it at different levels. It was kind of treated as normal. It was something that you worked on getting under control. And I also had the experience that for some reason, I would be nervous as fuck until I got in the ring or until I stepped on the mat. And for some reason, once everyone else had fucked off, and it was just me and whoever I was competing against, this level of calm all of a sudden came over because well, I'm fucking here now. Right? Now there's no turning back. There's no, I can't just turn around and get out. There's people watching. And then it would go however it went. But I wouldn't generally, lose because of nerves, then at that point, let's say I lost or whatever, it wouldn't affect me once I got going. It just affected me in the build-up. And then what really shocked me was stress and anxiety just starting to happen for what felt like no reason. And this was like a few years ago. And this was a very different feeling for me because I've had a lot of things go on in my life that have, especially when I was younger, that were very stressful, could have taken my life in all sorts of different directions, health issues, all sorts of stuff. And I never got stressed out about them. I always just kind of powered through. I had this mentality of like, done now, let's just move on to the next thing. And then since kind of, I guess, running a business, getting into my, I guess, more sort of mid-40s, this has happened the last few years. I'm 50 next year, which I can't fucking believe. I started getting anxiety for what felt like no reason. I'd get up in the morning and just have this fucking anxiousness, tight chest. And I'd be like, what the fuck's going on? Like, what is it that's stressing me out? And, a lot of it was, for me, is usually down to financials. It's usually down to, I'm not very good at not knowing, like running a business is not black and white, right? Yeah. When I worked for somebody, regardless of what the pay was, I knew I got paid on that day. I knew exactly what I got and I knew where I was going from. And I've never been fired in my life. So I never had any fear that I would ever be out of a job for whoever I was working for. So it was security. Whereas when I'm in a position where I'm not necessarily I'm in control because I run the business, but I'm not in control 100% how much money is going to come in every month, things like how much maybe I can take from my salary. Is it going to be up this month? Is it going to be down? Can I pay the bills? And that level of not knowing for me started to cause me a lot of anxiety and stress. And then I had to try and work out, okay, how the fuck do I let this shit go? Because this could go on for ages, right? So that was kind of my experience with starting to have that kind of anxiety. And it was very much my biggest problem as someone who had never really had it other than in the fighting kind of arena where it felt like, well, I should have it there. That's normal. Yes. Normal everyday life has never caused it me. I started to beat myself up a little bit. I'm like, what the fuck am I getting soft? Like, well, what the fuck's going on? Why am I having these issues? And I've talked to a few other people since I started putting a bid out because people always look at me, I think sometimes, and because I'm a helper and I like to help other people and I deal with everyone else's problems, people think I don't have any issues, right? And they're like, oh, fuck, you have had anxiety? And I'm like, yeah, fucking course I have. Like, I'm human. And people have reached out to me that kind of same that I would have thought hadn't, and they're like, "Fuck, mate, it can be fucking crippling." And for me, the way I always deal with it is to take some sort of action, and it's really fucking simple advice, and it's probably the same advice everyone will tell you when it comes to dealing with anxiety. At least like in the moment that you're having it, it's trying to realize what's causing it as quick as possible. So for me, if it's been something like, I know we're having a bit of a tough month, I'm worried about finances, I've kind of ignored looking at where everything's at. For me, it's like, okay, sit down and deal with the finances. Let's take a look. What's worst case scenario? What's best case scenario? Dig into the bank account. What have we got in the pipeline? Where are we at? Don't ignore it and hope that the month ends up okay. So for me, it's kind of go into the fire and not avoid it. By avoiding it, you get more anxiety, you get more stress. And the next day it's the same, and the next day it's the same. So some days I don't always go into the fire and try and sort my head out, but more often than not, I always feel better when I've tried to at least deal with whatever it is that's causing it me and come up with, at least in my head, with some sort of plan. And go, okay, even if this fucking happens, I'm okay because I'll just do this.
Yeah.
Rather than
Andrew Human. Andrew Human always talks about, do you fix the mind with the mind, or do you fix the mind with the body? And I think, like, can you fix the mind with the mind? I think absolutely you can. We wouldn't have therapy. We wouldn't have things like ayahuasca ceremonies if you couldn't. Yeah. But the therapy takes 6, 10, 12 months. I did a bout of therapy earlier this year with a company called TMP here in the UK.
Yeah.
And I never really noticed a change. I was burnt out. I was overwhelmed. I felt lost and trapped in my life. And I got to a point when I finished and I had my last session. I looked back and went, I don't feel like that anymore. But it wasn't like a bang. It was like a gradual step. And if you want to get yourself out of a hole, it's almost like, well, have I got 3-4 months to feel better? Or do I go, right, if I do something, I sign up to the marathon. I look at the finances. I go to the gym. Like these things that build momentum often are going to be the thing that's going to get you at least the quickest return on the investment, even if it's not the thing that finally finishes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's never at the necessarily the 100% fix of whatever the deep rooted maybe issue is, if there is one. And I think what highlighted to me that there was a bit of an issue was, by and large, my whole life training was usually my answer. You know, I'd go and train, get some good endorphins going, feel good, and forget about whatever was bothering me. And I started to notice that even training wasn't doing it. I'd train and I'd be on my phone and I'd be stressing and I'd be fucking. I'm like, I'm not enjoying my training, but my training isn't taking that feeling away. I'm anxious whilst training. I'm still anxious after training. That's when I realized it was a bit of an issue, and I was like, right, okay, I've got to start. Training's not going to fix it. I'm still going to train, but that's not going to fix the anxiety issue. So then it was kind of like, get up, try and deal with whatever's causing it. A lot of it was kind of, work and kind of business related. So it was, in some ways, it was simple to try and it comes and goes, but it was easier to put in a box of like, right, okay, this is my main issue right now. For other people, I think when it becomes more of a life issue, again, it's really just trying to face it. What is it? Ask the hard questions, whether it's to yourself or not. Are you happy where you are? Are you happy with your work? Are you happy in your relationship? Are you happy with your family? What is it that's starting to make you feel like this? And there's no black and white answer for anybody. And for me, I've noticed an age side of it as well. Like, again, I've always lived in this: age is just a number. Age is just a number until it's not. Right? It's easy. I talk to so many 30-year-olds, 30-odd-year-olds that are like, yeah, but you're in great shape. You're this. You're like. I'm like, trust me, in 15 years' time, if we could have this conversation again, hopefully I'm still here, right? You're going to understand a bit of what I'm saying, and I can't get younger people to understand it. I talk to other people nearer my age in their early 50s, and like, yeah, we all kind of went through the same. You hit this point in life where you're like, fuck, what is my life all about nowadays? Like, when I was 30, I was still the fucking guy smashing it in the gym, competing with everybody, fucking trying to be the fucking big dog, whatever. Now I'm 50, I'm like, fuck, I've got all these 30-odd-year-olds on my fucking heels and are surpassing me, doing things that, in the gym and lifts. I'm like, fuck, I couldn't do that even when I was 30, right? And now I'm trying to morph into this. And I always feel like that was where a lot of my self-worth was. That's my fault. I created that. I walk in a room and everyone's like, oh, it's fucking Jon, and whatever I built as like, this was my thing. And now I look in the mirror and I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit older. I'm a little bit blind. Do I need fucking glasses? And, all these things are starting to break down, and my brain's going, what's this going to look like when I'm 55? What's it going to look like when I'm 60? I'm not really going to be that guy anymore. And that transition of what my real sort of purpose in life is now, and what I should be chasing, and should I still be training as fucking hard and then needing a fucking nap all afternoon because I can't cope, but at least it allows me to still somewhat keep up with the younger guys. So age is a big part of transitioning, and only people potentially, if there's a few older people listening to this, will know what I'm talking about. Because to be honest, for me, 30, turning 40, these were never a problem. I never saw myself as really getting old. And my 40s has been some of my most productive years of my life. But flicking that switch to going, okay, fuck, what do I actually want my 50s to look like? Like, because sometimes I'm still doing stuff I was doing in my 20s, which as far as work goes, like I'm building a business, but some days I'm still sat down mentoring trainers. Some days I'm still doing education, and I still love all that stuff. But there's a part of me going, fuck, like, when does this move on a little bit? Like, when do I just get to sit back a bit? And I'm not even sure I want to do that, but I've got things I want to do that right now I can't do because I'm torn between two phases of my life a little bit. So it doesn't really answer your question on the mental health side of things, but I think the two biggest bits of advice I always try and give people is, whatever's causing you an issue, if you really know what it is, try and take some action, whatever that action might be. Like you said, could be something small. Do something to ease that anxiety, do something that eases the stress away, and talk to somebody. That for men particularly, our biggest fucking issue is we don't talk about it, and we don't really know who to talk to about it. And it can frustrate you if you talk to the wrong person. So using the age thing as an analogy, when I talk to younger people about this, they just don't get it. So I don't talk to younger people about it anymore. I don't say because I don't want to be that old guy, that's like, well, wait till you're my age and then maybe you'll understand. Because that's 15 years away. So we're not going to have that conversation for a while. So yeah, but those are the two real bits of advice, and how deep you then go with those two bits of advice can spin off into many branches of who you talk to, what kind of help you look to get. Are you ready to take some help? Because I think that's the other thing. You'll know if you've had therapy, you've got to be ready for it. Don't go into it because you think it will just fix you. Because 9 times out of 10, if you're not ready for it, you're just going to be resistant to anything that the therapist tells you. Especially if you're someone like me, who's kind of like, yeah, I know my own shit, I'll fix it, right? So, and then, really try and look at yourself and go, okay, what's the problem? Because I think most of the time we know, and as men we ignore it. I'm very good at knowing my own shit. I know exactly what's causing me a fucking problem. I just have to look at myself in the mirror and go, right, fucking try and find a way to deal with it, because, you're only human at the end of the day, and it's, you can go on with the big facade forever, but it's not going to help you be happy long term.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned there about the changing priorities, because I think this is something that's going to be. I don't have any data on this, but I wonder if this is something that's more prevalent in the fitness industry than anything else. Like, I know that I'm despite not wanting to talk about it with people 15 years younger than you, I am 15 years younger than you. But I had this point in time that, again, referencing a podcast, but Chris Williamson calls it the manopause, where every guy in their 20s wants to be a bodybuilder, and then they get to their early 30s and the things that mattered to them in their 20s don't matter anymore. And I think a lot of that burnout for me last year was very much of, right, I've been bodybuilding, I've been doing photo shoots, I've been getting insanely lean, but I'm in a long-term relationship now and I'm married now. And I'm like, well, I want to be like that, but I don't want it in the same way that I used to want it. And where is the next stage in my training career? And when you find that as you said, your identity for people in the gym and trainers in particular is wrapped up in their training. And then if you times that by the fact that training is also now where you work, your hobbies become your job, that I often found that I lost that love for training for a very short period of time. Like it's very interesting you went, training didn't solve the anxiety. Because if the business was causing you anxiety, well, where are you training? You're training in your business.
Exactly. I'm in my own gym,
Yeah, and I think that's it's a very important thing of like looking at where is your purpose, where is the next thing. Like, is that an element of where sort of hybrid came from, in the sense of like, I know you've got a bodybuilding thing, you've got a strongman thing, you've had a powerlifting thing, you're very much a doer, but then we have this fighting jiu-jitsu component. Has that always been a part of your training, or is that developed as your training philosophy has developed?
No, I mean, the fight side of things was always there. Like I started boxing at a very young age. So I started boxing as a kid. My dad introduced me to that. And then through my teens, I was hit and miss with it, because through my teens, I got into a lot of stuff I shouldn't have got into, let's just say, which could have took me down a very, very bad path. I trained a lot through it, and I went to a lot of old school gyms where the kind of people that hung out in the old school gyms, whilst some were very good role models and good people to be around, there was also a lot of the opposite. But at that age, even the opposite role model seemed cool, right? And I kind of wanted a bit of that. And, I didn't have really, much in the way of anyone to keep me accountable to where I wanted my life to go. So I always boxed, and I picked it up again in my 20s when I kind of settled down from being a dickhead. Would be the simplest way of explaining it without taking up the next 2 hours of my teenage years. And the usual story, right? I got into my early 20s. I got a job in a gym when I was 20, and that started to change things a little bit. And then I met a girl, and that got a little serious, and that calmed me down, and it pulled me away from all the stupid shit I was doing. And then I picked up boxing again. I always lifted, so I started lifting and boxing at kind of the same time. And then I moved to Manchester, and I was kind of like, okay, I'll start taking my career a bit more seriously. It's like there's, like we were talking before we started the podcast. I grew up in a small town called Blackpool. There's you're not becoming, a well-known, and no offense to Blackpool, but it is what it is. But I knew I needed more of a platform, and so I moved to Manchester. And I moved to Manchester as a trainer initially. Then I got the job running the gym, and everything kind of escalated in Manchester. But at the time I moved there, I was looking for a boxing gym. because I just wanted to keep my boxing going. I wasn't competing anymore, but I wanted to keep training. And I found an MMA gym because MMA was becoming quite big at that point. I think I was about 29. And he went, look, we don't do specific boxing classes, but we do striking classes, we do jiu-jitsu. And I'd just been reading quite a lot about MMA at the time, and it kind of intrigued me. And I went to a jiu-jitsu class, got put on my fucking back and couldn't move. Because, I was old school. Like, this is probably just after the whole UFC 1 and 2 had come out. Like, we used to talk as kids at school, right, with who beats who. And I was, in my day, I'm like, look, boxer's the hardest person in the world. Boxer beats everybody. Until a jiu-jitsu guy put me on my back and I couldn't move and throw a punch, and I was like, oh, shit. Okay, so from here, boxing's not that great. So that sent me off on the jiu-jitsu and the MMA kind of journey. And I always wanted to really focus. I always had a thing for athletes and sport, and I wanted to train athletes. And so whilst I was in Manchester building kind of my personal training career, I was also training MMA, training jiu-jitsu. I started helping to coach there. So I started coaching jiu-jitsu, started coaching the striking because of my boxing background. And then I slowly got into the S&C with the guys at that gym. Now, by and large, at that kind of level, there's not a lot of money in S&C in general, unless you get a really high level athletes, and you have to put your time and work in, and you have to, little bit of luck, right gym, right place, right time. Maybe the right person comes to the door where you can ride a bit more off the back of. So I was doing all that. So that was my life at that point. Personal training out of a health club in Manchester for money, because in the fight gym, that was more like my family. Right, that was more of a family than I've ever had. SBG in Manchester, the guys there. I spent 10 years of my life in there training, coaching, driving up and down the country every weekend for different fights, cornering some of the amateurs, cornering some of the pros at Cage Warriors. And because I was involved in helping them do the strength and conditioning, because none of those guys, I didn't have any money, don't get me wrong, but none of those guys had money to hire S&C coaches and stuff like that. We weren't at that level. So I just did it because I loved it. And I did that for about 10 years. And then there was that semi-wake-up call. I was like 39 now. So I 10 years of that. I've always done my career in a way that supports my lifestyle, supported training, supported what I wanted to do. And so the fight stuff's always been there. And but then I got the job with UP. And that took me to Hong Kong. So that was all of a sudden that I needed a job. I needed some stability. Manchester and my PT, everything was kind of all over the place. I couldn't really see a career and a future. So I took the job at UP, and that kind of escalated the personal training gym. And, like I think everybody learned at UP is like, okay, they're the best systems run personal training company in the world, bar none, right? And because it's systems based, whilst there's a lot of nuance to how good they really are versus kind of the rest of us that are all, trying to do something similar, you learn very quickly, even though they're not teaching you how to run a business, they're teaching you how to build the systems to run a business. And that's why I think so many people have been very successful running their own gyms off the back of UP. They don't always give UP the praise and the credit they should, but, I've had my issues here and there, as a lot of people probably know. But I credit everything I learned there helped me build and grow my own business.
I think with the UP as well, I think one of the big things there, sort of cut you off, but they, as you said, those systems mean you can work with more people, you can write programs when you're tired, and they also open your eyes to so many things. Like for me, and I'm sure it's the same coming from Manchester. Like you have a little bit of knowledge of who's around, but I was like, I don't even remember who I was following for information and to learn from. Then I came to the UP, and whether it's UP's mentors directly or whether it's Brian Walsh, Kelly Starrett, then on to people like John Shallow Kassam, all the people I now know that I call mentors, and thankfully some of them friends, whether directly or indirectly, opening that door really did open my eyes to a career, which I'll always be in their depth.
Well, it opens the doors as well. And I think this is people that, again, things that people don't like. I'm a big believer in credit where credit's due for everything, right? And we all need help and steps along the way. And, a company like UP, no matter what, all of a sudden your stock goes up in our industry when people hear you work for UP. I'm not sure how it is nowadays as much, but I know back when I started, there was still only 3 or 4 gyms, and it was a
100%.
big deal.
Yeah,
People were like
100%.
shocked if you got a job at UP, right? They were like, "Fuck, you got a job with those guys?" So straight away, your value went up just by putting that t-shirt on, right? And that's huge. And this is the thing that people don't always get. And look, not saying my gym and my business is anywhere near that level whatsoever, but trainers coming through, they want to skip all this nowadays. And it's like, if
Yeah.
you really want to grow, like, go and cut your teeth at these places where you're going to get some instant respect. You're going to learn a lot, but it's also going to open a lot of doors, because people will start talking to you that might not have talked to you previously, but now they know you're a UP guy, and what kind of comes with that. And I think there's a lot to that still, because I think there's not as many. I don't think anyone's going to do what UP's done
No.
and build 30 odd, whatever they're at now. I think 30 something personal training gyms. No one's going to come along and replicate that. So, I've told a lot of people, regardless of whether they stay there forever, when people say where would be a good place to go and start, I'm like, if there's a UP in your area, go and fucking work there. Go and learn what you need to learn, and then
or even an element of one of the imitation ones, and I use the term imitation loosely, because like somewhere like Hybrid they flourished and they built their own, and places like HIT and all these other great gyms. But we now
absolutely,
have so many people that have want to start working as a personal trainer to get this imaginary Wi-Fi connection on a beach in Bali to do online coaching. I'm like, even if you want to be an online coach and you don't care about the one-to-one, there is stuff that one-to-one coaching teach you, like getting up early, grafting, working hard, doing stuff you don't want to do, because I've done a lot of that. And that stuff now, even if I don't need to do that, I always know in my business. Like, imagine that anxiety you felt when you were worried about the finance in your business. How bad it would have been if you didn't know in the back of your head you had a few gears you could go. Like, I've got a few gears of hard work that I know I can tap into. A lot of these guys will crumble because they have no reference point of hard work.
No, absolutely. No, and like I say, it's difficult because it appears, I don't know if it is easy, but it appears easy to make an online business nowadays and make money. Whether these people are very good at it, I think a lot of them are becoming very good marketers, which is part of the business, don't get me wrong, but they're better marketers than they are coaches. So people that are not necessarily that educated can make a good living, and there's a lot of cookie cutter stuff out there that makes it easy for them to work with a lot of people. And look, fair play, if you can make a living, make a living. But I think there's a lot to be said for being an in-person coach first and then moving more towards online. Just
the big difference I've seen is in the industry now, like certainly now coming out and doing, I've ran education for UP in Asia, and then ran education for HIT PT, and then doing this full time now online. It's when we started out, certainly when I started out, I'm sure it was still the case with you, that if you wanted to make more money, you got better at your job. You invested in Charles Pollock and you invested in these people. Whereas now I almost need to convince, look, I can't guarantee you a $5,000 month like the business coach down the road can, but in 10 years you will go, I'm so glad I did that. That has made me tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. But it's just not direct. People don't play the long game now. And I don't know if it's social media. I don't know if it's competition with other people that are making $5,000, but everyone's in this quick, what can I do? And I've had a lot of people come into my mentorship where it's sort of like, your niche on social media is so good, but you say you want to work with busy professionals who want to lose £5 without giving up the foods you love, and then they get chicken and broccoli 3-hour workouts. One of these is wrong, and I'm not saying which one it is. Maybe your Instagram message is wrong and you want transformation guys, or maybe you have no idea how to coach on the back end, but we need to solve one of these problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything. You're right, and I don't want to bash social media because it's there's so much good about it. But yeah, I mean, look, social media has speeded up life, right? And it's also speeded up a generation of the big sell now, especially with the business coaches, is not they're not selling you how to run a business. They're selling you a lifestyle. They're selling you look where I go on holiday. Look what car I drive. Look at my house. You could have all this if you follow my business system. And they're talking about personal training online, and you can earn a lot of money doing that. But at the same time, that's not necessarily I'm not saying it's a bad reason to get into earning money in general, right? If you want to have nice things, then you're going to have to work hard. But the way that this stuff is marketed nowadays is changing people's perception of why they're getting into what they're getting into. I had this big conversation the other day with my whole team. I sat them all down with like 10 of them. I'm like, okay, what's your mission? Why do you do what you do? And I just blank faces. And I wrote mine down on the fucking thing. I said, this has always been my mission. Regardless of money. Forget money, my mission was X,
Which
Y,
is
and Z.
what, by the way?
Mainly to help as many, I have to remember it, but to help as many people lead a happier, healthier, fitter lifestyle through exercise and healthy exercise and nutrition, because that's in its simplicity what we do as coaches. I think people overcomplicate that, and then that by keeping that mission, that can be then in whatever environment throughout my career that takes, whether that's in person in my gyms, whether it's online, whatever it is. My goal with people is kind of the same. How many people can I reach and help with what's helped me in my life, really, which is exercise and nutrition, training, and teaching people, and the mental aspect that comes off that stuff. And I've started trying to do this with more and more people that I either mentor or coach and whatnot, because I've said it for years. Like, whilst going back to the UP t-shirt and stuff was a great thing, I never worked my arse off just because of the t-shirt I had on. That never mattered. I worked my arse off. I've had many personal training t-shirts on in my life, different companies, right? I worked my arse off no matter what, because I knew where I wanted to get to.
Yes.
And I think having your own, companies create a mission statement and a fucking core beliefs board and all this shit for the company. And I'm like, why don't individuals have their own? Right? Yeah. Because you've got your own goals long term. You're not going to necessarily work for a company for the rest of your life. You might. And maybe if you are, you want to buy into their mission statement without a doubt. But as an individual, you need to make sure you've got your own. You buy into your own mission statement, which can be fluid. Mine's been fluid. But that's why the statement about people training and nutrition is kind of clear but vague. People could be of all walks of life. It could be in the fight environment. It could be Gen Pop. It could be, I hate all the stuff where like people only want to work with CEOs, because I'm like, do you know how that sounds? I want to work with high level executives. Like, you sound like you just want to work with people with money. Like, just say that, right? Now, yes, people have got to afford you. I get it. But by putting that label on, it means you're only interested in helping someone if they can afford you. And I'm like,
yes,
yeah, I'm interested in helping everybody. And if I can help you, if I can put myself in a position, which is where I'm at right now, like I've got myself back into training athletes, a gym called Boxing Gym Churchill's. I've been training that for 3 years since I kind of moved out here. I'm working with some of the young pros there now, and I don't charge because I can. I will make something off the back of it. But initially I was like, look, these guys need help. They can't afford a high-level S&C coach. I want to train athletes off the back of what I'm doing. My business makes me enough money to help other people, right, and do other things. I've taught jiu-jitsu classes for free for months and years on end at different gyms. When I was in Australia, I was teaching jiu-jitsu every week at SBG because there was one close to the gym in Sydney. I've done this throughout my whole career. I do what I need to do to earn money, and luckily over the years it's got better. But if it's important enough for me to help other people, I will do that for free because I love it.
Yes.
And I'll do it as part of a passion project, and I enjoy doing it anyway, right? Now, with the athlete stuff, if something comes of it, and I'll build something off the back of it, I do have a goal with it, don't get me wrong, but right now it doesn't need to be about money. And when it's not about money, it's not stressful.
And it's still part of that mission, right? Like it reminds me of something that Jordan Shallow, friend of both of ours, said on a call with me. He was like, he was talking about pricing when I first started like going into online coaching, going into the business side of this. He said, price yourself effectively. He used to price himself so his courses or the coaching that he offered was as accessible to many people as possible because he wanted to help as many people. And then what he realized was, well, people who can't afford me couldn't afford me even if it was half the price. So by me pricing me at the level what I'm worth, which means I have now more disposable time and resources to help that person on Instagram for free. Like you have a gym that you price fairly for the people coming in and you work with these executives and CEOs, but that allows you to have the time to go, well, I'm going to help that box gym down the road because I love it. And that helps me as many people as possible be happier, healthier, fitter, as does working with 10 trainers who all have their bunch of clients. Like, it's the
Absolutely.
same message. It's just spreading.
And it helps you, progress, I believe, as a coach as well. I mean, I get so many messages from people that train in gyms like ours. They train Gen Pop or they work in a health club and they're like, oh, how do I get training athletes? And I'm like, go and train them for free. And the look on their faces of like, but I've done these courses, I've done this, like I'm not working for nothing. I'm like, well, you're never going to train an athlete then. Because if you think that walking in to a gym with some certificates is going to get you training the highest paid athlete in that gym, whatever the sport is, you're fucking living in a dream world. Like athletes like to train with people they trust. You have to
Yeah.
go in and build trust. Walking in with a bunch of certificates on a piece of paper, they don't give a fuck about that. Most of the athletes I've trained is through talking, being in the environment, being around them, then watching me train, them see me do things, then starting to see me do things with one of the athletes in the gym, and then all of a sudden like, oh, maybe could you help me with some of this stuff? And really making yourself fucking useful, right? And if you do that, again, there's no guarantees, but with a bit of luck, you keep working at it. And if you're in a position, hopefully, and this is what I say to all these trainers that ask me, like, don't give up your day job too soon. Like, that's your bread and butter. This may take you years to get a high level athlete like some of the guys Jordan trains, for example. You mentioned Jordan a couple of times. He and you'd be surprised. Even if he was to tell you some of the fees you get with some of the top level athletes, it's not quite what you'd think. He's not giving up prescript anytime soon,
No.
right? Yeah, he's earning very good money with his athletes, but so people have to understand there's a bit of give and take. If you somehow magically end up with some world champion who's going to take you around the world, pay you a massive salary, but remember, it's in the sporting field, it can be short-lived, right? I work with I know a guy who trains some high-level boxers, pro boxers, and the fight world's the worst for this because you can have 2 or 3 world champions on your books. But if you've not got the next ones coming through, which a lot of times, sometimes you haven't because fighters are so spread out, all of a sudden they retire. And you're like, oh, but what about me? Right? And then another one retires. And now all of a sudden you've gone from, okay, I was earning X amount of money training this world champion. When he calls on me, we go and do an 8-week camp and I make this much money and it's great, to I'm back to working with pros still, but pros now that can't afford what the world champion afforded. And now I've got to rebuild and reset again and take this up. So it's not a coincidence that when you see a lot of, even more nowadays, and I think this is why the internet is, again, such a good thing for this, because you can now create, there's a lot of top level S&C coaches that train fighters and whatnot, but they have their sideline of, they either have a gym or they have their online coaching or their online education program to coach other coaches to coach fighters, and you can buy all their programs, you can get all this residual stuff. And 1 minute they're training a top level athlete, maybe that athlete then retires, maybe then on their page there's a few athletes are training that you've never really heard of, they're working their way up again, and it's this cycle. And in a lot of top class sports, unless you're working with a team, if you're just working with individuals, there can be a lot of that. 1 minute you're working with one of the best in the world, the next minute you're back to number 20 in the world and you're hoping that they get to number 1 and you're working with them and taking it up, and the money changes up and down. It's not this black and white, I just want to work with athletes. You're going to have to put your time in. You're going to have to put way more time and effort probably in than you've ever done with Gen Pop, right? For less money. And it's a gamble. If you're fucking good, and like you said, coming back down to educate yourself, continue to educate yourself, continue to understand what athletes want and need versus Gen Pop. It's a very different environment. And having jumped back into it recently, you're like, fucking hell, sometimes it's like, careful what you wish for, because you jump back in and it's like, fucking hell, this is a lot of fucking work. More so than sometimes what I do in my own business where I'm earning money. But again, I love it, and it's something somewhere I want to go. But yeah, there's a huge misunderstanding. People think they're going to go from doing the Poliquin courses, doing Gen Pop, and now I just want to train athletes. But I'm charging £100 an hour or whatever. You're like, well, you better get used to charging nothing or very little, or maybe just getting your expenses for a little while and go and get in the environment. Because if you're not willing to go and be in the environment, you're probably not going to get a job with an athlete. And then it's about time, build, like everything, build relationships, be valuable, show that you're useful, show that you're someone they can trust as well. Because that's what, especially higher level athletes, It's not a coincidence that the best of the best S&C coaches are not sticking their high-level athletes all over social media, because the athlete doesn't like that. And you don't want to be showing off what you're doing with these people versus your competition. So, yeah, there's a lot.
They hit the nail on the head there when you were like talking about like people saying I've done this course. It's like that if they would get annoyed if an actor or a sports star went into a restaurant and go, I'm taking your table, do you know who I am? That's essentially what they're doing. It's like, do you know who I am? I've got this qualification. And like most of the people that work with athletes, there is an element of luck in it. Like I don't know if using Jordan. I don't know how if this was the case for Jordan, because he built up a big reputation through the education, through the prescript, that people may have come to him. But most of the time, when these people, even if we look at someone like Joe Bennett, hypertrophy coach, the top level bodybuilders he's working with, when he first started working with, no one knew who they were. It was you start working with people for free, and you either see some potential or you get. And again, hard work and your coaching, they become world champions. But there's a lot of things that go into world champions outside training, be in the right place, right environment, bit of luck.
Absolutely.
That you run with that, and if you're expecting this to make or break your career, well, you're gambling on a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's like do the work, because you mentioned Joe Bennett. He literally just posted yesterday a back workout he did with Derek Lunsford, right? Years ago. This was a couple of years ago. Derek Lunsford's just won the Olympia. Well, a few years ago, I don't know what the odds were of Derek Lunsford. I'm not massive on bodybuilding. I don't know the names, but Danny does a lot of it, so I've got a bit more into who's who now. He probably didn't know a few years ago when he took him through that back workout, showed him some intricacies on back training. And he says, even in the post, he says, look, I'm not taking credit for Derek Lunsford's back, but here's some stuff I did a few years ago. Now, Joe Bennett's massively popular, massively successful in the industry anyway. But I bet when he did that workout a few years ago, he wasn't thinking, I'll bank this for whenever. It was just done. It was put to the side. He moved on working with whoever, and then all of a sudden he goes up into the Olympia, and it's like, oh shit, I could use this a little bit, right? Yeah. It adds to all the work he's done. He did the work anyway, and what the deal was, for all we know, Derek Lunsford could have just walked in his gym. They did a bit of training. Maybe he didn't even charge for that session, whatever they did. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now that's come back tenfold. Because now there's this relationship, or whilst Joe Bennett's not saying, hey, I'm Derek Lunsford's coach, he's saying, I have worked with this guy and he's now Olympia champion, right? And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Like, don't get me wrong, maybe he did charge, but I see a lot of this stuff go on, especially when I was training at Gold's quite a bit when I first moved here. There'd be a little bit of flicking around, and all of a sudden, someone's filming a bit of something and training with Charles Glass and whatnot. But I know Charles Glass hasn't just charged that guy. This is a little bit of Instagram stuff. Because he's actually working with someone else over the other side. I was there not that long ago, and 50 Cent was training next to me. And he's still pretty jacked. But all of a sudden, later on, I saw, all of a sudden, Charles Glass did about 20 minutes with him, all for social media. Yes. Didn't really go through a workout or anything. And then later that day, Charles Glass posts something, and it's 50 Cent, and da-da-da-da. And I saw the whole thing happen. There was no money exchanged in that. Right now, Charles Glass makes enough money doing his thing in goals. Right, he's a very famous bodybuilding coach. But there's times even he's like, this is going to look good. This is something that's going to. He doesn't need necessarily much more presence in that world. But it was an exchange of 50 Cent being like, I'm training with Charles Glass, because anyone in the bodybuilding world knows who Charles Glass is, and Charles Glass getting to go, I've just done a little bit with 50 Cent, and it was super simple. And there's so many of these things going on that I think people are misunderstanding how you build, something in those kind of worlds, whether it's with famous people or whether it's with athletes and stuff. Like I said, it's not just about walking in the door with your certificates and going, hey, look who I am, because they're like, well, who the fuck are you? Right? Like, I've been going in Churchill's for I don't know how long, and I get high fives and fucking hellos from everybody. But since I've started training some of the guys, and people are now asking, oh, who's this guy? Because they've all seen me training. Now all the fighters are, hey, how's it going? And now I'm coming and asking me a few questions and things like this. So it's all about being in the environment and building a relationship. And something will come off the back of it, whether it's, I don't know, millions of dollars or whether it's not so much. But if it's where you really want to go, and it's, and it shouldn't be about the money until it is, just go and fucking do it. It really drives me up the wall when some of these young coaches have got this ego of, Oh well, if I'm not going to get paid, I'm not doing it. Well, go and sit on your ass then. Keep training
Yes.
Gen Pop, which there's nothing wrong with, and go and sit on your sofa in the afternoon when you finish your sessions and wait for some athlete to knock on your door, because it ain't going to happen. So
100%. And obviously we spoke about coaches rushing things, and obviously you have 10 trainers that work for you in hybrid now.
yeah,
So what do you think, other than rushing the process, what do you think is the biggest things that you've seen that coaches get wrong today?
get wrong
Yeah.
in what in like career progression, or in just trading and stuff in the
Let's
gym.
let's go in terms of getting results. 'Cause I think we've turned into the career progression is get out there, do stuff,
Yeah,
meet people, work hard. Let's terms of actually getting bang for your buck results.
getting results. I think a couple of things that I've talked about a lot recently. The detail is a huge
Okay.
part, right? So let's take let's take the generic GBC style template of training and the low carb diet and nutrition, right? Which is kind of the staple starting point, give or take. A lot of people have moved on in different ways, but generally we know this works. I see it a lot where I look at the training template and they're delivering, an A1 and an A2 and a B1, B2 and all this sort of stuff. So the structure looks right and the tempo's written down and the reps and sets are written down. And then I watch the session, right? And the rest periods are too long. There's no tempo going on. The weight's not enough. So, and this is my argument always with programming. It's like people go, "Oh, I love programming." I'm like, "But are you fucking doing what the program says on the piece of paper?" Because I don't see that you are. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that it's the detail in how the program is delivered and applied that gets the result, not just it being close enough. Right. So someone who's not interested in detail, you go, well, okay, yeah, they're doing 8 to 12 reps. Sorry, I'm looking at my gym now and there's no one doing anything. But I find myself doing this when I'm talking about gym and gym floor. I start looking out. I was doing it with Jordan the other week. I'm like, okay, focus. And I'm like, look, it's the fucking detail. Like, yes, you're supersetting upper body, lower body. But I've just watched them drop the bar at 10 reps and they could have done 15. Yeah. Right? I've just watched you talk for 5 minutes in between set 1 and set 2. You're losing intensity. You're doing no tempo. The whole point of this, especially with the beginner, is to focus on the tempo. And for me, it's just lazy coaching. They don't really want to focus in on the detail. And then the nutrition side can be a little bit similar. Like the setup's easy. Create the macros, tell them how to track, put everything on paper. And I'm like, okay, but what's your follow-up process? I did a big thing on education yesterday, and we've created this big kind of tree on adherence, right? And following, are they doing this? Yes, no. And if no, where'd you go? And unless I've literally tried to idiot-proof the whole thing, because I sit down with trainers and we have the same conversation week in, week out about why are clients not adhering to the nutrition. And it's this constant, well, I've just told them to get back on track. I'm like, well, they've been off track for 2 weeks. They're not going to get back on track. Let's change the plan. Let's come up with a different approach. What have we tried? What are you doing? And again, some of it's lack of education. And with newer coaches, I understand maybe they don't know enough yet. And that's why we have mentoring and stuff. And that's why we try to help with interventions to come up with ideas to help them so they're not left on their own. So detail is 100%. I think one thing, trying to overcomplicate things but then not deliver it. We simplify it and give you a system. Just fucking deliver the system. If you deliver this correctly, it will get results.
Do you think there's an accountability component to that though, as well? Certainly when it comes to nutrition and the touch point side of things, is that I've had this parts of my career, right? You get comfortable. This becomes your Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7:00. Then we're with you for 6 months, and you get chatting away, and then you don't until you stop and put all your clients down on a list or sit down with you your one-to-one. You go, oh yeah, Steve's killing it. Like, really? He hasn't lost weight in 6 weeks. And has he not? Numbers, one thing we do with our coaches, we have a Friday status check. You've got a spreadsheet. You're going to put things in. Right, what's the weight that they expected to lose or gain, or what's their performance goals? What's achieved this week? And I don't often need to do anything or mentor. Often enough, just keeping yourself accountable where you go, oh, I thought that guy was doing so much better. You now have a fire, a bit of urgency. Like you'd want urgency for your client, you now have urgency as the coach.
No, 100%, and that we do that with the mentoring. So we have we have everything obviously on all the spreadsheets, and it's a fucking headache to delve into everything. But I have like a progress tracker where every trainer just puts the basics down, and that's got to be done weekly. So they put all the clients down, they put starting weight down, current weight, how many weeks they've been training, what problems are we having, so that I can see in a snapshot. Okay, this guy's been with us 8 weeks. They've only lost 2 pounds. What's going on? Right now, hopefully, it's not got to 8 weeks. That's an exaggeration, but these things happen. So accountability is huge. But I think I don't want to know if it's the confidence is the right word. I do think, and I've said this a couple of times recently. I think a lot of PTs and trainers do come into our world, and by and large, helpers tend to be kind of people pleasers. I've said this before, and they don't like difficult conversations, or they don't know how to go about having a difficult conversation. So they allow the client sometimes to lead the dance with all the excuses. And because they want to help so much, they try everything. And they just take things away from what we know works, to the point where they've ended up almost agreeing with the client to do nothing.
And this is why people overcomplicate as well, right? Like you mentioned overcomplication, and people go, well, is it that they're overcomplicating it? Or is it because they've not delved into the important stuff, that they're trying to find a way to get them to lose weight that isn't attacking the obvious answer because they don't want that conversation? The people that go, it's their thyroid, it's their cortisol, it's their mindset, it's maybe they need a blood panel. And maybe these things are true, but I would argue more often than not, it's because you didn't actually delve into, well, hold on, that food is shinier than a mirror. Could you eat for a second, please start saying, like, you're eating more than you think you're eating?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I think that it's because the conversations from the trainer's point of view, and I try and say this a lot, they take it all personally. So the conversation becomes personal, because maybe the client will get a bit upset. Maybe the client is a bit resistant to being told that they're not doing what they're doing right. But I'm like, if you set the client up right, and my big thing is like, look, I always do this on my board. So imagine a second, but I draw a circle. And I draw a circle, and I said, inside this circle are all the things that I can do within my power to help you lose weight. And this is science. I didn't invent this. I didn't make up fucking energy balance. I didn't make up that if you overeat, you will put weight on. I didn't make up that, the way to lose weight is to be in a calorie deficit. I didn't make up any of this shit. Not mine. I don't take it personally. This is the rules. Anything outside of this circle, I can't help you with. So if you're not willing to track something, right? If you're not willing to somewhat stick to the plan, if you're not willing to do all these things within my rule set, and I can go from like almost, I'll never say 100%, but 100% sort of best way. If you track, if you do this, if you follow all this, I can pretty much guarantee you'll be here in 12 weeks. And then this sliding scale goes backwards. So, okay, you're not willing to track, you're not willing to give me your weight, you don't really want a meal plan. Okay, now we're maybe at about 50% accuracy. So whilst I promise you we could maybe get here now, it's going to either take you a lot longer, or maybe we will or we won't get there. Like, these are not my rules. I'm just telling you, if you're not willing to put this level of effort in, and we're down here, this is going to be, this is probably going to be the result. Are you okay with that? If someone tells me I've got to save, $1,000 a month to make for the next 10 months to have 10 grand, and I say 500, they're going to go, well, you'll only have 5 grand then. And in fact, with my ex, well, why? Well, why? You promised me I'd have 10. Like, but you're not doing what I asked you to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think expectation management is the thing? It's like coaches don't set these expectations from the off. They don't go, right, you want to lose X amount of weight. Yeah, like you don't want to lose X amount of weight, so this is going to take you X amount of weeks. This is what I need you to do. And I a lot of the times where I'm working with these guys that struggle with having these difficult conversations, the two things I always say is like there's a reframe. Like, you may worry that you telling your client off for not eating what they said they were going to, or not training hard enough. They may not like it, but nothing makes a client dislike you more than feeling that you've wasted their time and their money. And the second thing I always look at is like, look, and you made a great post on this, which was a massively like singing on the same hymn sheet as me about clients not stopping cheating themselves. And it, like, as you were saying, it's like, well, you're not following the diet. I am, I promise you. Well, you're not, because the data says you're not. And if you can go with data, it's so much easier. Me going, hey, why are you eating cheeseburgers? It's like, hey, look, you said you want to lose 0.8 per week. We've lost 0.3. And looking at the data, you've had 12 meals out this week. So what are we doing to bring that number down? Or do we need to change the goal? Like, I don't care. And most clients, they go, I don't want to change the goal. But you've never been a dick.
No. And you using, I do it a lot, using data and numbers and stats to make things less personal, right? I can't argue with stats, and I do that as I work my way up with the trainers and mentors. Like, it's never a personal attack on how I think you're working, because to be honest, sometimes you get it wrong. I can look at a trainer on the gym floor and think they're being lazy, think they're not working that hard, and in my own, I sometimes get this thing, especially when I've worked with way more trainers, different gyms, 20, 30 trainers. I can make an assumption about someone because maybe I don't know them as well as some of the other guys. But then I look at the stats and I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm like, oh, actually, you've got quite a lot of people moving. Actually, what you're doing is pretty good. It's better than I thought it was. And then there's others that I've thought were doing really good. I've looked at the stats. I'm like, fuck, you're winging this like crazy, right? And I thought you were better than you were. And I always go, okay, don't make these conversations argumentative and personal. Like, this is my opinion that you're not doing a good job. Not my opinion. These are the numbers. You've been given 20 clients. You've lost 15 of them. And 3 of them haven't lost any weight, and you've still got 2 of them. Like, this is a problem. Now, I'm not personally attacking you. I'm just telling you, if you was me, what would you do? Right? And I tend to talk a lot like that. And I do that now a lot with clients, and I try and educate the trainers at some point, because I do think some trainers, they're almost over helpers. I've seen it a lot. They're not, it's not that they're trying to not get a result, but it's like they let, like I said before, they let the client lead the dance, and they try to fix everything to a point where they've gone outside the circle of what works, and they're still trying to fix things. They go, yeah, but the client won't do this, the client won't do this, so now we'll just do this. I'm like, yeah, but did you have a conversation that now this won't work? I'm all good if they just want to come in and enjoy exercising, fine. But you've overhelped that much, and now if they all of a sudden flip, because this happens, and this is the bit that a lot of the trainers don't get. You know, if a client all of a sudden flips and goes, hang on, I know we've acted like best friends for the last 6 months, but I've not changed. I've spent a ton of money. It's me they come to.
Yes.
And if they say something to you and you have to go all of a sudden backtrack, well, you haven't been doing this, this, and this. You're like, well, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me make this adjustment and this adjustment? I'm like, don't let it get that far. Set the seed at the beginning, set the rules, and go, we can play in this field, right? This is best case scenario. This is worst case scenario. But if we drop out of this, none of this is going to work. And set that scene from the start. And that way you've always got somewhere to come back to when they start going off track completely. And you go, look, I can't go outside of this. If you go outside of this, nothing's going to work. So I need this as a minimum. And I think, you know, and that's my biggest concern, because they don't get that sooner or later the client's always right. And whilst they're acting like everything's cool, when the client then comes to me and says, look, I've been doing this 6 months, I've not lost any weight. And then I sit down with the client and go through what they've done, with the trainer and go through what they've done. I'm like, why did you let it get to this point? Well, they said this, they said that. I'm like, yeah, but you should never have let it get there in the first place.
Yes.
Like, we should never have got to outside of that rule. And like I said, present things with stats and facts, and don't make it personal. It's hard because, you know, people do get upset. I've seen clients get upset. You know, I've seen clients get upset with a trainer trying to push them too hard in the gym, at a place I won't name. But they were told, and it wasn't the trainer's fault. And literally, I saw it happen in the gym. This guy had a fucking meltdown on the track. And I pulled the trainer and I said, look, just stop pushing him. I know, because it didn't come from me. The pushing him hard thing didn't come from me. It came from someone else. So they were just trying to please the system, right? And I was like, look, and I said, look, I will back you 100%. Next time we have a meeting and you're getting told that you're not training clients hard enough, I will back you, because I saw this happen in the gym. So, because it's easy to judge when you're not watching what's going on. So, yeah, I mean, that went off on a little bit of a tangent at the end. But yeah,
it's good. Like, I agree with that so much. Yeah, I agree with that so much, especially when you, like, the circle's a really, really good analogy, because, like, you'll see people who are like, right, you set those expectations from the off, but then they go, well, I want to have this, or yeah, well, I want to have my weekends and I want to track. And I'm always like a this or that question. Like, I always call it the Snickers bar analogy, right? So you want a Snickers bar and it's like 380 calories. I'm like, cool, here's your options. You can either have the Snickers bar, but you got to understand that you're going to be a bit hungrier because we have to take this much food away from you to make that work, right? Or you could not have the Snickers bar and have this much more food, whatever you want. And then you've not told them they can't have it, but they're now going, they either go, well, yeah, I want it, but they understand what has to occur to make that workable, or they go, no, I don't want to be hungry. Fuck that. And then they make that decision on their own. And I one of the biggest tools I always teach, like, use a this or that question when you want to draw somebody in. There's not a magical third option here. It's like, look, you're not losing. We can either take this much food or we can increase this much activity. The client has a choice, but only these choices.
Well, it's funny, right? I mean, like, what you're describing there is what I say to the guys a lot. And I'm like, look, everything we do, parries life, right? Everything is a consequence. You can do whatever the fuck you want, but there's a consequence to it. And are you willing to pay the consequence, right? And you've just done that analogy perfectly. Like, there's if you eat that Snickers bar, there's a consequence. You can either now take something else out. You can do 30 minutes of cardio, burn it off, whatever it is, but you can't, and again, I don't mean the pun here, but you can't have your cake and eat it. You want to lose weight, there's going to be consequences to getting to that result. If I want to build a business, there's consequences that are going to happen to my actions. If I do this, then hopefully we do it. But if I don't, that's kind of my fault, and we've gone backwards and now I need to go forward. I need to understand that every decision I make in life will cause a consequence. Do I want to go and spend all this money on yet another fucking car? Well, the consequence there is my bank account's going to drop, and then I'm going to get stressed because I've got no money, but I've got this nice shiny fucking car, and I'm a bit like, fuck, did I really need that? Did I want that? Is it that important? And everything is that. And I think maybe as you get a bit older, you appreciate and understand that more. But I think as younger coaches, if they can learn to, like, exactly like you said, talk in that kind of way of, look, I'm not here to tell you off. We're adults. I'm here to fucking guide you in, like our parents did, right? I didn't listen to a fucking thing my mum ever fucking told me to do as a kid, right? But she talked in everything with a consequence. She never told me what to do ever. But she said, you'll fucking pay for it if you do it. And I paid for it, whatever it was, whether it was through being punished at home or being punished at school, or there was a fucking consequence to absolutely everything I did. Some things I got away with, but 9 times out of 10, if I was to write a book, you go, yeah, that didn't end so well because I chose to do the wrong thing. And when 9 times out of 10, when I chose to do the right thing, it tended to work out better. But we have choices all day, every day. And food, training, exercise, everything we're trying to achieve is just a string of choices. And how often can we make the better choice and not the shitter choice? It's that simple. And
Peter Hitchens always said that you choose your regrets, which I think is a wonderful saying, because it's like you don't get to have none. Like if I decide to go and put all my time and energy into my business, my regret might be my relationships. If I give everything to my relationships, my regret might be my business. Like everything comes with a pro and a con. It's like, which are you more willing to have? Which regret are you more willing to take?
Oh, absolutely. And I think 9 times out of 10, we know what we're doing when we make the decision, by and large. And I always do say to people, look, there's no such thing as a bad decision. It was the best decision you could make at the time. But 9 times out of 10, there's been, especially some of my worst decisions, should we say, there was a moment before I did it that I was a bit like, this could go fucking horribly wrong. But for some reason, I'm going to do it anyway. And then 9 times out of 10, they go horribly wrong afterwards or whatever. But I knew, if I was to write a book now on that kind of thing, I won't be sat here blaming my upbringing, blaming parents, blaming this. It's like I fucking knew exactly what I was doing. Every single time I made a choice to do something, I knew how badly this could go. I knew if I did this, I could get fucking arrested. I knew if I did that, it was illegal. I knew if I did this, whatever, And I think, unfortunately, we get to a point where we want to kind of find things to blame rather than just go, this is my choice. And when you take on a client in the gym and stuff, again, it's trying to have that conversation with the client. Like, look, you've chose to be here. You've chose to put all your money into this. And we go into the deep reasons. And, I'm not a big believer in, find that deep rooted why, because not everyone really has one. So what I want to coach is choices. You have a choice. It's up to you. I'm not going to make you feel bad for making the wrong one, but do you want to get this or not? And if we can get you making the right choices more often because you actually create a conscience around the wrong choice and what it caused, which is how we usually make better decisions, right? Even growing up from kids, we start making better decisions. You go, oh, fuck, if I put my hand in that, it's going to hurt. I didn't know that until I did it, but now I've done it, and maybe I'll not do it again. So, and I think that's part of the education process. I'm not saying clients don't know that if they go and eat that 2,000 calorie fucking pizza, it's going to fuck them up for a few days, but highlight. I don't care that you ate your pizza, but just look what it's caused. Now we're going to have to do this for a whole other week to get you back there. You've got all this time to spare. If yes, fine, but just understand this is how this works. It's not complicated. It's actually very simple. And my job is to help you make better choices more often. If we can do that, we'll get you to where you want to be.
And they might have needed that mistake, right? Like I always talk about this reverse dieting. Right? I see a lot of coaches beat themselves up when the clients don't follow the reverse diet and they rebound. And while that could be the coach's fault, yes, it could. But I'm maybe I'm wrong, but I asked every single person I've ever had on this podcast, which is a lot of people, if you've rebounded ever after a diet. They'll all have said yes, and they all know more than the client. Like you almost need to make that mistake to go into the next one going, don't want to do that again. And you just get better and better and better. And without the mistake, you haven't actually learned anything.
No, I 100%. I mean, there's a fine line as to how many mistakes you want to make. I mean, I was joking about this with someone else on my podcast the other day because they know me quite well, and they were like, "Look, you're probably, destined to learn most things from making mistakes. That's just been my fucking life." But ideally, my job is now to help people make less mistakes and not make the mistakes I've made. But definitely some of my best lessons have been through fucking it up the first time round and working out how to do it better next time. I think the only caveat to that is that they have to want to do better next time. Like, did you actually learn from your mistake and what it cost you and caused you? And will you remember that next time? Because sometimes people don't. We can remember it for a while and then go, oh, fuck, I've done it again. And I've been guilty of that as well with tons of things. I'm like, I'll fucking never do that again. A year later, I'm doing it. And I'm like, oh, I said I wouldn't do this. But so again, teaching self-accountability or trying to learn some sort of self-accountability with these things. Like you say, fucking up's not a problem, but are you going to remember that next Friday? If you went out and drank fucking 10 beers and go, oh, yeah, shit, I get it. I'm not going to do that again. And then you're having the same conversation next Saturday and it's like, okay, well, I can only help you so much, right? You're going to have to be the one to make the decision not to do this or to do less of it or whatever. I can keep having the same conversation with you. But all I'll do, like what you said, I'll just keep changing the goalpost. And that goalpost you might never see it if you keep doing what you're doing, but I'm telling you now, this is what we need to do. And back to the in-person thing, I didn't make this up. It's not my training program. It's not my nutrition. I didn't invent any of this stuff. This is just how it works. I'm here to deliver the best way to apply it.
Yes, yeah. So I've got a couple of final questions to ask before I let you get going with your day. And like the first one's like, we've spoken about a few of them, right? You've made a few big scary leaps in your career. You want a new change, you moved to Manchester. You've got in the ring and boxed and fought. You've entered strongman competitions. You've moved across the world to Hong Kong. You've moved out to LA. Like, what do you think the importance is between like for someone taking a big out of their comfort zone leap?
I think it kind of comes back down to, do you have some sort of long-term goal or thing that you're trying to achieve? I guess if we're talking about careers right now, I always knew that I wanted to, in some way, create some sort of international presence with what I do. Now, do I have a super huge following on social media? No, not as much as a lot of people. But I know now that having worked in Australia, having worked in Hong Kong, having worked in Singapore, the UK, now I'm in the US, it's opened so many horizons to people that I wouldn't have known without being in those countries. And now I have lots of peers and eyes on me in an international way that other people maybe don't. And it's not me versus other people as such. Gyms in two different countries, and just kind of feeling that there was a bit more out there for me than just the UK. Let's say as a starting point, and initially Blackpool and then Manchester and then trying to grow out of the UK, not growing out of these places, but kind of going, I always wanted to travel. And I didn't really start traveling until later in my career because PT is a really hard fucking career to travel with. But it was something that was always a part of my bigger picture. And I've had this conversation in business talks and things like that recently, like remembering to keep reassessing your long-term goal and where you want to go. Because, even building gyms now has kind of got me a little bit more static again. And I love to fuck off places. Like I love LA, don't get me wrong, but I want to sample living somewhere else in the US. Maybe somewhere a bit more inland. Maybe because fucking buying a house here is almost impossible. It's so expensive in LA. But now I'm a little bit more tied, so now I have to kind of push my career to get this place to a point where maybe it doesn't need me, and we can, and Danny, obviously there's two of us running it, so it's even harder for us both not to be here, right?
Yes.
But get it to a place where maybe I can. So the leaps all come about, like, your pros and cons list, right? Where do you want to be? What is your actual goal with your longer term plan for your life and your career? And are they in sync? How do you want your career to look? Because if you want to be able to travel loads, don't get a gym because it's a brick and mortar business, because you're going to be stuck at it for a while, right?
Yes.
And whereas online now, people can go and work from anywhere. I see people, they build a decent online presence, and if you wanted to go and spend 6 months in Dubai, you could.
Yeah.
You could move there. I mean, there's visas and all these things make it a bit more complicated, but you can travel and work from anywhere. And that's the beauty of the internet now, which I think is fucking amazing. But I think sometimes we forget to align those two things. First of all, have a vision for where you want your career to actually go. Where do you see yourself in 10, 20, 30 years? And that's hard, because I've sat down with every trainer in their 20s and said, where do you see yourself in a year? And they can't answer. Yeah. And I'm like, we better think about it. And that's why I've done a lot more talking with my team about these things now, trying to give a little bit more life experience and be, okay, do these things align? Like, what do you want individually as a person? Do you want kids? Do you want family? And how is this going to align with your career? And what do you want for your career? So you don't hit these walls of things like you said, spending too much time with your friends, family, partner, and not building a business, spending too much time with your business and not having this. Things happen in life that take us away from what we thought our path was. If you have a bit of a feel for where you want to go, you can kind of navigate your career ahead of time to when those things happen, right? So for me, the big leaps are really about, okay, where is it taking you towards where you want to be long term? Yeah. And if travel and international things is a big thing, then take the fucking leap. Because for me, it's the best thing I ever did was getting out of the UK. I love the UK. I come back and I miss it. I come back to Manchester and I say to a lot of people, like, for me, there's nowhere like Manchester in the UK. And everyone will say that about their own places they spent the most time with. But I just met so many cool people there, and I go back, still train in gyms, still see all the people I used to see 10, 15 years ago when I go back for a few weeks. But I'm happy to get back on that plane and get back to my life and what I do as well, right? But for me, spreading my rings and getting out was the best thing I could have ever done. So I didn't look back once I did it. For some people, it could be a mistake, but the bottom line is you can always go back to where you can always go back.
That's the thing, right? Time will pass you by and you can't go forward, but you can always go back. No. And I very much agree with you in the sense of, like, for all of my career, the biggest leaps forward were moving to London to start a job at UP, moving to Hong Kong where I knew nobody, coming back to UK and starting a business, like, remotely, completely different change. These were the big life moments that I've taken the bigger leaps in probably the last 4 months than I had in the year prior, where I started to get that comfortable. I need an itch to scratch. I need to move away from this thing. Yeah. And I look back at my time in Hong Kong and I go, I'm a different person than 4 years ago when I arrived on those shores. And it wasn't like therapy we spoke about. I don't know if it was on air or before we went on air, but like therapy is this like gradual, slow thing that happens. 4 years in Hong Kong, I look back and go, man, I've just slowly but surely become a different person. And I am so grateful for that. And I also knew that I was one of the weird ones. I knew I wanted to be some form in the education field when I first started my first PT job. And people scoffed at me going, don't rush the process, son. I'm like, 13 years later of doing the gym floor, knowing I needed the grind first to bring this podcast back full circle. I had half a vision. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I didn't want to say I was an educator on day one because I would have been a fraud. And I did 13 years on the gym floor, working in multiple countries, thousands of clients, hundreds of trainers. And it's just, even now, I'm like, I still got a long way to go. Now I compare to the pre-script. I've got to compare to Jordan, and I can't grow the beard. I've got to grow the brain.
I think look. I think that hits the nail on the head, right? Like, I don't think it's about. Everyone talks about mapping out this fucking step by step. It's like, no, look. It starts with where you think you want this to go. I've told everybody from 16, 17-year-old, I wanted my own gym.
Yeah.
In some format, right? And it took me years to get one, but I didn't know how that was going to come about. I didn't have this step-by-step plan. I just knew one day I want my own gym. And if I do all these things well enough and hard enough, and the opportunity will arise. And it did, right? I think some people obsess over the time frame. Set a time frame. But if you set yourself a time frame of 10 years, it takes 15, so what? That can be adjusted, right? So I'm not against setting time frames. I'm not against setting deadlines, but just go, I'm going to get here
Have a direction.
somehow. Yeah, as long as the direction's going to go all over the place. The sat nav's going to fucking do its thing every now and again and take you the wrong way, but you will get there because you've got that vision of what you want, right? And you had that early. And like you say, I don't, when people scoff when you walk into something new and someone says, this is what I want to be, I've had it myself. I remember getting a question asked. I'll not go into detail, but when they said, what do you want out of the company? What do you want? I said, I want to be doing what you're doing. And they literally laughed. It was a bit like, well, hold your horses there, son. When you're ready for that type of thing. I was like, well, look, I didn't say I was ready, but I said one day I want to be doing what you're doing. That's not what I said. You asked me what I want to do in the future, right? So egos collide and. So I think, absolutely, just have a vision for what you want and just work towards that. But don't forget to fucking enjoy your life a little bit on the way.
So we have a closing question I've always asked, because we have a lot of people that, like, the motto of what I run now in this mentorship, and like this podcast is a passion project. It's not about this, but I know a lot of coaches listen to this who suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome, and they listen to these guys who, maybe because of the social media presence, like you said earlier, people don't even assume you have problems. So I want to make people realize that no one's really got it all together with this. So I always ask, name one thing you have changed your mind on.
Changed my mind on. Okay, for like loads of stuff. I'm trying to think of anything recently.
That's a good answer.
Probably, the biggest thing is assuming you've got your shit together at any time in your life, because it changes, right? And again, this started a little bit. I won't bore you with a long-winded story because we're closing up a little bit, but this started with, my own journey in my 30s, thinking that when I hit 30 and my career was going pretty well and everything was fairly settled, and I thought I fucking knew it all. I sometimes, you get memories of some of the shit you posted 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't believe that shit's been going that long. And I was preaching some stuff and I'm telling everyone how to live their life. And I read it back now, I'm like, it is so cringeworthy. I'm like, I was 30 years old. Do you know how many fuck-ups and twists and turns and life changes have happened since then? That's nearly 20 years ago for me now, right? And then similar 40s, I started thinking I've got my shit together. And then next is going to be 50s. And it just, each decade keeps changing. Don't ever assume you've got your shit together. You've got your shit together for as long as you've got your shit together. Stop preaching to everybody else how to live their fucking life. Just focus on your own and help who you can help, right? I think we get to this point in life where we think at 30 something, it's now my job to tell everyone else how to live their life. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And I've heard it because I listen to podcasts. A lot of the podcasts I love listening to are the guys, they're all in their early 30s, and some of them get a bit preachy on life. And I sit back and laugh a little bit. I'm not judging, because I'm like, I was that. I was that 15 years ago. And now I sit and talk to some of these guys. I'm like, it's all going to change. It will all change to varying degrees.
Yeah.
But what you think you've got together now will not be as together in 10 years, because your life will change. It will evolve. You maybe meet somebody. I've listened to people say, my career comes first. I've not got time for women. All of a sudden, the fucking love of their life and everything falls apart. Like they've left their job. They're doing something different. They're living on a fucking beach. And I'm like, you had it all together. I thought you were doing this for the rest of your life. Well, so stop thinking you've got all your shit together. Focus on the now. Focus on what you are doing at the moment and where you want things to take you. But don't take the next 5, 10, 20 years so fucking seriously, because it will all keep changing and you'll have to evolve with it.
I think that's my favorite answer that I've ever had to that question. So I love that. Thank you very much. So
I may be one of your oldest people on the podcast. There's hopefully a little wisdom comes from age. I don't know.
I was going to have a quick think, but I don't want to sit there and it's almost more insulting to sit there and think for a long time. Like, have I? But for people that want to, and you said you always wanted a gym, and for the few times I've poked my head around the door of the gym that you have in Hong Kong, and from the pictures and Instagram that I've seen of the gym there in LA, they are some of the most beautiful looking gyms. So you've done a very good job of what you set out to achieve. It looks like you've nailed it. So for people that want to learn about you as a person, or hybrid gym, or even want to hear about Danny and her bodybuilding story, which is, by the way, also incredibly inspiring. Congratulate her from me. Where can people follow everything that you're doing?
Instagram is at Jon Bond Coaching. Email john@hybridgymgroup.com. That's about it. Those two are probably the main mediums, I guess. Obviously, we have at Hybrid Gym LA is my gym here in LA. So this is where I'm based out of and do most of my work. So you can check that out. And that's it. Just reach out, drop me a message.
Then for people listening to this, obviously are still in Hong Kong. You've got 2 locations now in Hong Kong, right? So you have
we've got H Queens and Entertainment Building in Hong Kong. So again, at Hybrid Gym HK and at Hybrid Gym H Queens.
Awesome, man, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up. Really enjoyed this. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, that's been cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Selfmade Podcast. If you like me and enjoy binge watching podcast episodes, click here for our latest episode. And if you want to stay in touch and find out when the latest episodes go live, click here to subscribe to the channel.